Teresa, 45.
I'm Rebecca, 44.
Lisa, 41.
Kata, 38.
Maggie, 45.
Molly, 38.
Josie, 60.
Katie, 44.
Claire, 34.
Samantha, 40.
Marsha, 66.
Welcome back to Interwovxn's spring-summer season of 2022, featuring conversations in celebration and support of middle life. This episode showcases a conversation between Kat and Megan as they discuss women raising girls, transforming shame, embracing failure, empathy, and making space. Remember to hit subscribe so you can keep coming back and to visit our website so that you can sign up for our newsletter as well as access more resources. Find us at interwoven.com. That's interwovxn.com.
I am Carmelita too. My nickname is Millie for those of you who I met prior to about age 20, which includes Megan. Woohoo! My nickname is Kat for anyone that was probably 21 and on. And I am 46.
And I am Megan. I'm going to say that I also love that your name serves as like benchmarks in your life.
Yeah.
And you are Millie to me. So my name is Megan and I am 45.
Hearing those numbers is crazy. And I think that's a great segue into me being, I think, 19 when we met. And you were 18-ish?
I think so. We were in college and very appropriately, we were taking a drawing class together. And that is my whole world. So that somehow seems just exactly right that this really seminal friendship in my life began as I was learning to draw.
I have these vivid memories of going into that art studio at Notre Dame, which is where we both started our undergrad. I remember thinking, she's really good and she works really hard. But I remember thinking, who's this person that's always there when I am and is probably there when I'm not?
I remember how good you were as well. But also, if I can just be real shallow about it, I remember how cool I thought you were. Because I really, honest to God, remember some of the black and white dresses you wore and the lipstick. I think I had on like something exceedingly not cool.
I've had to tell this to my daughters and to other people in my life that have recounted how I would dress then, that at the time, I really lived this mentality of like, I might fail at everything else I did because I felt like a misfit at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And people might not like me, but at least I feel like I look good doing it. So I would walk into an exam that I crammed the night before. I wasn't stumbling in like my pajamas. I figured at least I'm going to look good doing it. I'm going to fail. I'm going to fail in style.
What's funny is you and I could probably have a whole sub conversation about what we wore during our time there. I made some very regrettable choices, but I also sort of the opposite approach. I wore the exact same outfit every day for a year. A white t-shirt and like paint pants. And I think I didn't want people to have an assessment of me based on what I wore. Maybe that was not the way to go.
And then you and I parted in terms of our academic careers because I left Notre Dame after my second year. So we actually only went to school together for a year. I just kind of rediscovered that, but quickly bonded and then stayed in touch. And ever since then, we kind of embarked on different paths and then managed to end up in the same city. How old were you?
All I know is that for the first half of our friendship, which is how many years? Did we figure that out?
I think we said 27-ish.
Oh my, it's a whole person. Yes. About half of it, you and I lived in different places. And then what has been so nice is that for these past 10, 11 odd years, we have both been in Chicago. And so that's also just coincided with our sort of middle years, our parenting years and so on. So it's actually been lovely. But in the years that we lived in separate places, you and I really did prioritize traveling to see one another. And I am going to say, I'm going to pat myself on the back and you on the back that we actually put in the effort. And as a result, like really have the gift of this friendship.
So much of that was also pre really handy cell phone. And, we were on email, but I had to check email at the school lab because people didn't have laptops. And if you had computers at home, it was dial up and sketchy. So
this is a good moment for me to share that you and I think as part of our sort of artistic inclinations, you and I wrote each other letters for a long time. Yes. So I suspect we both still have those.
Yes.
And funny enough, I know that your penmanship absolutely affected my penmanship, and it's still in there. The ghost of your writing is absolutely still in mine.
You know what? I feel exactly the same way. I've never told you that.
Well, and I think, you know how they say that in relationships, okay, I don't really know the science here, but that people have a tendency to mimic the other person, and it's
Mm.
somewhat unconscious, but it's like almost like an empathy or something.
Mm-hmm,
I think
mm-hmm.
that's what you and I were doing. And
Yeah.
but it has lasted, which I love.
Yeah, yeah. I even printed up some of our emails. It's kind of stepping away from that physical writing aspect,
Yeah.
but I know I've got emails that had a cadence to them and subtle poetry here and there, or pulling in references, pop culture, etc. Yeah. Someday we'll pull them out and we'll reread them. So middle life. Well, you and I both had our kids around 35.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I gave birth to identical twin girls when I was 35. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
Lainey was when you were 35?
yep, I was like a month past my 35th birthday. I want to say that whether I knew it was going to happen or not, it really felt like having kids just changes everything. As Megan knows, for me, the addition of children to my relationship with my partner at the time was incredibly impactful. Like at the end of it, our relationship didn't work out. And I think in large part because I don't think he was someone that was necessarily cut out to be a dad. I feel like our culture now is more accepting of people making that decision, choosing not to have kids
Mm-hmm.
and seeing that as a path. And I don't think either one of us, once we got married, really considered that as an option. Nonetheless, I do feel strongly now. I have no hatred or ill will towards it. I almost feel like he tries and he shows up the way he can, and the way he shows up is good. But at the time, I didn't know that fatherhood would change everything.
I think what's so hard is that there's no trial run. You learn a lot about who you're with once it is underway,
Yeah.
and the commitment to co-parenting is there and forever. And
Yeah.
so that's, I think, part of the challenge. I have a distinct memory of you being in my hospital room the night before I gave birth. That's important to share because my kids were quite premature. I also have a memory of seeing you right after you had come home with Lainey. And honestly, I remember you in tears, and I remember thinking, oh, this is hard. I like those moments where you and I showed up for each other.
Thank you for bringing that back, because isn't it funny what other people remember about you? I don't recall either of those instances, but I remember you were the first person that I saw in person when things went south with my then husband and what we shared together. I will say, I mean, gosh, what a gift to have a long-term friendship like ours. Yeah, of course, kids impact our sense of identity. And I want to say that the past 10 years has really been a lot of, for me, learning what doesn't work. I feel like in my 20s, I was so open-minded, and there was a phrase bouncing around. I don't know if it's still bouncing around, but this whole year of yes, and just say yes to everything. And while I appreciate that sentiment, and I definitely am all about being open-minded and don't hold yourself back, don't limit yourself, etc., it's just as important. And I don't think I thought about it as much then, but to acknowledge what is a hard no.
Oh, yeah. And I feel like what woman in middle life is like yes to all? And I absolutely agree with you that developing comfort with a no without a million qualifiers, particularly since you and I are both pleasers to some degree. And so I think it takes a bit of work to manage one's own discomfort with possibly letting someone down, not giving them what they want from you.
I think we've touched on sort of boundaries, right? Saying no and getting comfortable with saying no to people, or passing on things, or just saving your energy for yourself. But I also had to ease into the letting go of identities and thinking that, oh, this is still someone I want to be, or this is still someone I think I want to be, when in fact, if it's not serving you anymore, let it go. That is a no.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think the lesson of showing kids that one can prioritize what matters most, I think there's something to that. Because also, if we take on too much, then that just becomes stress in my house in some fashion. And I don't need more of that. I already need to like figure out how to be more patient and show up more and all these things. So can I pivot and talk about the fact that it's funny that you and I both have two girls, and I would love to hear your thoughts about what that has looked like. What have you done? Tell me all your tricks as for instilling confidence in girls, and just sort of what that path has been.
And then I'm going to bounce this question back to you, because I feel like every person who has kids has their own secret like hacks that work for them. Every mom has wisdom that they, works for them and could work for other people. So I'm just a huge believer in kind of those sidewalk drop-in bombs of wisdom when you're dropping off your kid, or you're picking them up, or you're kind of those conversations in passing. But getting back to your question, I love having daughters. And I think that part of it is just that familiarity of the two of them and I being assigned female at birth. There's immediately this resonance of, I understand the experience that you are living in to some extent. So you kind of start off with this commonality and this baseline of relationship that if I had boys, admittedly, I don't know what it's like to grow up with a penis. So I think that there's that kind of aspect of raising children that are assigned female at birth. The thing that really struck me somewhere in there, I think when they were like 3 and 4, because that coincided with the time I was going through my breakup from their dad and working through the divorce. You know, when they're babies and they're toddlers, you can, they're so malleable and you kind of feel like, what are they really going to remember? Sure, I may have messed up once, but I've umpteen million times to fix this.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the divorce started happening, that was a time when I felt like, I don't know that they're going to forget all of this. I remember thinking, I don't think I have that flexibility. My relationship with my daughters really took a turn then because I expanded my sense of parenting beyond hitting the marks of what they needed and really took it on as having to show up for them as a role model. My relationship with my first husband was so towards the end there, after we had kids, had become, really tense and uncomfortable. And we were in therapy. And then there were events that occurred that led to a situation where I thought, do I stay or do I go? And I was hemming and hawing on this for a really long time. And ultimately, it was when the question popped into my head of what would you want your daughters to do in this situation that I had instant clarity. I couldn't have made the decision for myself. If I put this situation into their world and thought about what did I want them to do? Who did I want them to be? It made it so clear. And that's when I kind of realized, oh, I have to do this. I have to aspire to be the person that I want them to be someday. And that's really, I think, what parenting does, especially, I would think, if you are parenting a child who identifies as the same gender as you, not like cookie cutter, I want to be my mom someday, but thinking about how is my mom making choices? How does my mom show up for people? How does she make decisions? So that all really started to hit home, which eventually led to me launching a podcast for moms called Know Them, Be Them, Raise Them. And it's specifically targeted towards moms of girls because I do think it's a really unique position we find ourselves in. We want to know all the information that's changing every day for our daughters, but we also know that so much of the work in raising healthy children is showing up and doing some healing on your own and making decisions about the values that you've inherited, the cultural priorities that maybe you lived in, and what really serves you.
I will tell you, if I had one fear about this conversation today, I thought, I know what I'm going to do because my memory is so bad. And I thought two things. One, I was driving in the car and I think many of us do this. We subscribe to the idea of sort of the spaghetti at the wall approach. Like if I just approach a topic enough times, in aggregate, it'll get to the sort of essential message I want. Like the topic of sex. Like it can't be one conversation. It's going to have to be like just a bunch of noodles I hurl and that hopefully the message will cohere. Anyway, we're in the car. I talk about something about social justice. I can't remember. And my daughter, Frances, interrupts me and so sweetly says, Mom, am I seeming too like I'm wanting a big chat? And it's become like a joke with my husband and me now of like, do I seem like I'm wanting a big chat?
Oh, she's like a therapist in the making.
Yeah, so sort of like the tidbit approach. I think that that's something I have in mind with my kids. And then I also was thinking about the fact that I do appreciate, and I have to look at this as, is it a gift? Is that the right word? I have to look at it as something positive that I can show my kids what it looks like to be a body that has delivered children. And like, this is what I happen to look like at 45. I'm getting out of the shower. They're in the bathroom brushing their teeth. My daughter Ruby looks at me and says, ew. But I said, no, not ew. This is what I look like now. Not that every moment has to be one of confidence, but I do want them to see that, and it's not just physical, but like I want them to see I'm trying to make choices that would make you proud of me and that perhaps would be instructive for your own life. And then at the same time, I was also thinking about, I'm not sure I heard the phrase, I don't know enough. I think about wanting to allow space and me to have sort of made it clear that my love for them does not hinge on any certain beliefs. I want them to be kind. I want them to be a number of things, but that my love is not contingent and that I want to have made enough space for them to find their path.
I agree. I feel like, and I wonder if it's because you and I have we grew up in a similar time in similar, I feel like, socioeconomic places in society. So I wonder if some of that had to do with having professional fathers. But I agree. I did not hear, I don't know very much. And I also didn't feel like I could fail safely. And again, I don't think they did it deliberately. Like I demand demand perfection or you won't get dinner. It was more just sort of what I soaked up. I definitely want that to be different for the girls. I remember reading this quote or story about Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, and how when she would go home at the end of the day, her dad would ask her and her brother, "How did you fail today?" And if they didn't have some story of how they made a mistake or how they messed up or how they failed, then he would kind of gently say, "Well, try harder tomorrow. Like try something new tomorrow that you fail at. Try something different because if you're not failing, you're not learning." It just kind of blew my mind. Like I was the straight A, and I think, I mean, I know it made me super risk averse. I stuck to what I knew I was good at.
Yeah. And I remember you and I had the conversation that, and I think sports is so fraught. I have extremely not sporty kids. My kids like art and reading and whatever. If I'm remembering correctly, she really enjoyed it. But then was she necessarily the top of the team or a starter
Definitely
or whatnot?
not. Yeah.
No. And you know what? Like, I think that there being room for activities or engagements in life that are not just about excellence, but actually can be rewarding or nourishing in your life in some other way.
Yeah.
So I think that means having to suspend ideas of failure, especially if you're like used to the grades. I absolutely can see that in my having shown up in my own life, having been told you're such a gifted artist. Yeah, well, when it came time to learn anatomical drawing, I hid from that, and it has hounded me because I hid from something that I was afraid I would fail at.
Yeah, hand-eye coordination, like your kids and mine, is not my forte. And I think I've told you this story before, but I will carry this to my grave, this kind of feeling of embarrassment and shame around how I showed up one day for a date. I was supposed to be on a date with this guy and we were going bowling, and I was so afraid to mess up that I just sat there. And I was like chitter-chattering with all the other people, but I refused to pick up a ball and throw it down the alley, even though other people had gutter balls, and we ended up breaking up. Probably because he thought, she's such a bump on a log. Why would I want to hang out with somebody that doesn't try anything that might make her look bad?
He was probably like, you know what? If she was a better bowler, we'd be together.
Exactly. We would be in a bowling league today. We'd have our own embroidered shirts.
Oh, that's a whole nother path. But you know what I think is interesting about that, though, is the fact that you remember, right? Like, who knows who the dude is? Who knows? Like, who cares about bowling? But the fact that you remember that, we should circle back to this later, because I suspect everybody, I definitely have, like, this little mean grab bag of mistakes I've made or things I've said that were hurtful or inappropriate or whatever, that like, it's like the bag just pops open whenever it wants to. And man, those are some things that'd be nice to let go.
That's a really good point. And I think that a lot of women tend to focus on the things you don't do well versus the things you've accomplished, right? So you look at the to-do list at the end of the day and I see the 2 things that aren't checked as opposed to the 7 things that got done. Or you look at a 98 on a test and you think, but it's not 100. I can see that being a carryover to some extent of some of those tendencies to want to be, I'm trying to avoid the word perfectionist, even though maybe it applies, because I do think perfectionism is kind of laden with a lot of notions and ideas and concepts that may or may not apply. I can see where I have some perfectionist tendencies, and that may be related to it is the strong emotions that still remain in the moments that I know I let myself down. I think that's maybe part of it too, is that memory resonates so much is because I feel like I let myself down. I use it now as a tool to do things that I'm scared of because I remind myself, remember that? And it felt so crappy. Well, let's not feel that way again. Like, what's the worst that can happen?
Okay, so thinking about the bowling anecdote, thinking about like how we dressed in college or these things, is there something about middle age? But like, do you think you care less about how others see you, or do you think you think less about that?
For me, and I'd be curious to hear what you think about this as well, but I can definitely say that I don't think I'm any less aware, but I do think I let it impact my decision making less. I want to say some of it is because of the preciousness of time. I just feel like in your 20s and even 30s, it feels like the world is your oyster, that you have so much time to figure things out, because we hear like the average life expectancy is 78. Maybe it's even up to 82 now for women. And I think to myself, being a lover of math, like that is only, I'm not even 30% through. I'm not even halfway through, whatever it may be. Yeah. I'm on the tail end of that now. I'm on the other side of the bell curve. And we've had more opportunity to see friends or parents really be impacted by age. And I feel like that for me has been a huge, at least in the last, say, 5 years. A huge factor when I'm thinking through what do I really want to accomplish, taking into consideration this person's opinion of me, stopping me from accomplishing that despite all I know about my limited time and how badly I want to do something, then screw it. It does not serve me. So let it go.
Yeah, I have changed how I read as I've gotten older, and I think I used to think that completion was a value in and of itself.
Mm,
And I don't know that I think that anymore. When I start a book and it's not for me, I will move on. And I used to not do that because
mm.
who did I think was paying attention, right? Like there was some like box where I could say, oh, I read that. Then you realize no one's looking at your list. No one's paying that close attention. So
Mm,
I think I am more willing to part with things. I think your point about proximity to mortality and seeing other people's health struggles, our parents as they approach their
mm.
later years, I certainly have that more in mind. Just as relates to this, I feel like I've just become more aware of health as taking work. I'm a type 1 diabetic. I had gestational diabetes, and then they thought I was type 2, and I am type 1. But so that takes a lot of work. And that's something I'm continuing to try to educate myself about this autoimmune disease. And the way I try to look at it is that most people have something. It reminds me of the often just invisible struggles of others, because everyone will have one at some point and likely has one going at the time. I think I was fortunate because I had a stable upbringing in a loving house, and I was sporty, so I was fit or whatever. I think I had just the gift of health from a young age, and I know many don't have that. So I had a lot of years of just feeling like I'm
You kind of
fit.
coast.
I feel good in myself. I'll eat that nacho. And then, I reach a point in life where you're like, okay, I have a different relationship with who I am physically. My hope is that makes me more empathetic, because that is most people.
I'm so glad you brought that up, but that there's a sense of empathy that comes with these challenges and life events that happen to you, whether you want them to or not. For people like you who choose to kind of see it beyond your sphere of yourself, I think that it adds to the color of the world and to how you raise your kids, because they will have a better understanding about how people deal with health issues in a way that they wouldn't have if you were continuing to coast along as that fit person that never had to think about it. It's like sort of an ableist perspective in a way. I love that you brought that up, because it makes me want to raise my daughters in a way that continues to be more eye-opening and make them more compassionate to others who aren't necessarily people that look like them or think like them or have the same challenges or privileges that they do.
I like what you said better, because I also should fess up at this point that I'm a little bit of a whiner. So I definitely talk about this in my house more than my husband would like to hear. And it is a struggle. So I definitely want to make sure that I don't sound high-minded. And also, I listened to an interview with Frank Bruni, the writer, who has had some significant challenges with his vision. And I think it's degenerative. And he wrote a whole book about how that has sort of turned him outwards and seeing the silent challenges of others.
I love how we're pulling in inspiration from all sorts of places, because I was just about to reference an Instagram post, but it basically said your best looks different every day, in saying that you are a work in progress and working towards this goal. On one day, it may be amazing. Like you have the chats that aren't too big with your kids in the car. And, it's everything is said in a non-whiny voice. And on other days, maybe you don't say anything at all, but that's your best, and that's fine. And that's something I really hope to pass on to the kids too, is you don't have to be 100% all the freaking time. Because I definitely felt like that. I felt like there was a phase in my life where I was hitting my marks meant 100% on 6 different places: financial, spiritual, emotional, physical, relational, as a parent, etc. That's completely unsustainable and unhealthy. I want them to see those nuances and that ebb and flow.
I love that also, because it allows for and accepts the changeability of people. I think we often like to tell ourselves stories about who this person is. But the fact is, like, it's all mutable and subject to a million things. This is going to be a quick diabetes metaphor. So apparently your blood sugar is affected by, okay, what you ate. Yeah, we all know that. It's also affected by how much you moved. Are you stressed? Did you have a nightmare? How much water have you had? Is it too hot out? Like literally everything you can imagine.
Yeah.
And I say that because that's also just the human condition. So I love your point that how well we can do is subject to all these other variables. So, and there's a generosity in allowing for us each to change and have room to do better.
And even day to day, but also in our lives, right? Tell me if you've had this feeling moving into middle life, the idea of your dreams evolving. When we first met, I thought, I want to be an artist. I'm going to live in a loft in Soho with high ceilings and be the talk of the town and go to fancy parties. And definitely was a point where I had to think through, do I still really want that? And in the letting go of that, what replaces that? And it can be hard, but I think it's important to let yourself change on that scale as well.
Yeah, and even like what your definition of success or satisfaction is. And I think in a way, like we're the only ones who can be clear on that. I mentioned I'm an artist, and I just had a show here in Chicago at a place called Regards, and I've had friends who wonderfully came and saw it. But I mentioned it because a few friends who further afield said, well, how'd it go? And I said, there's so many ways I could answer that. I could say, did I sell as much work as I wanted? No. I could say, oh, well, I got a review. That's actually something I was excited about. But the thing I'm really trying to center was I felt great about the work. I couldn't have done better, And so as sort of a measure of success, that has to be first, because the others are things I cannot control. So I think your point about just what are the stories we tell ourselves that can reaffirm things we want or can keep us in some like Death Star loop.
I know that was a great visual, even if it doesn't exist. It's so true. The external validation and asking and questioning ourselves. I think that, there's this question about, as we're going through middle life, what are things that we want to carry with us and what are things that we might let go of? And I think exactly what you were saying, identifying what are the stories we tell ourselves, where do they come from, and do we want to bring them forward with us? How do they serve us or not? I feel like for a long, long time, I was a little more hung up on that external validation than I care to admit. And ultimately, like you said, how does it make you feel inside? What is your internal barometer saying?
Is there anything you find you're still trying to shake off?
I struggle, and I think I probably will continue to, because of it's how I was raised and choosing some of the generational inherited values and how those will apply to how I choose to parent my daughters. Because my parents were immigrants, super hardworking, so much love that was shown in ways that I am choosing to show up differently for my daughters. It'll just keep going when they're going on their first date. How am I going to show up? Am I going to be my dad and take down the date's driver's license number? Every kind of nightmare experience, just making those choices and trying to figure out what do I really want? Is this what my parents would have wanted? Or is this what I really want? Is this what society is telling me I should want?
Totally. No, that all speaks to me, like how you translate what you inherited and then what it is you want to keep and others not. But something that I wanted to foreground in my home and parenting, I would say patience is a challenge for me. I'm working on that. And I see it showing up in my kids too in different ways where, like, as commonly referred to as big feelings, that I see big feelings. And that could be me too. Like I can say something calmly 3 times, but the 4th time I'm not usually at my best. Repair is something that I think a lot about and I try to model for my kids, and I see them exhibiting that. Yeah, because that's not something that was really in our house either. And not that we had, not that it was like a really fractious household, but there was 6 people. If someone was a jerk to you, your sibling, vice versa, you just moved on. You just shoved forward. I really want my girls to know how to pause, reflect, apologize, or even seek an apology. I feel like those are emotional strengths or emotional muscles, I suppose, that I really would like them to develop early in life.
Yeah. On that note, have you apologized to your kids? Yeah.
That's a great question. And yes, and I have. And sometimes I think hearing myself apologize is also a reminder that I need to do better. And I feel like it's a must. I feel like parenting is about like these particular people. You can read books and the rules and the whatever. Truth be told, it's like, who is the person sitting in front of me? And it's my job to learn them, to sort of like pivot and adjust and be the parent that kid requires.
I completely agree. So Eleni and Karina, my daughters, are 14 months apart, so they're close, but yours are, minutes apart. And you would think that the same inputs to both of them would have the same results. But no.
I know, totally. And one was growth restricted in the womb. And I think they had a different in utero experience. And part of me wonders, like, is that it? Because yes, I have identical twins. And it's always funny to me. People ask or say, oh, which one's which? And it's funny because to my mind, they are so profoundly different. Right? Yeah, it's kind of a unique parenting assignment because part of my job is for them to have the space to be their own people. And that's true probably for any siblings, but maybe all the more so when they have the same face. When they fight and one's like, you're ugly. And my husband's like, you have the same face. I think the challenge in some ways is not that far from what you have because the world will still lump you together. Maybe not as much so as identical twins. It's like, what light can you allow between those children and what space can you allow for them each to kind of find their own little road?
Yeah, especially when they logistically, so much more convenient to lump them together.
But yeah, so that's actually an area that I have to continue to improve and just sort of make space for it. I feel like making space is sort of, I don't know, man, that's like half the challenge. I see it. Certainly my girls are 9 now and just seeing their increased desire for independence and me kind of trying to figure that out because it is easier for me to do it all for them. So it's easier, but then you're like, you know what though? Then you end up with a kid who's really not equipped for the world.
Ill-equipped and potentially entitled. You got to let them mess up. And even if it means extra work for you, at least let them go through the motions. Otherwise, how are they going to learn?
Yeah.
You know?
We have friends who have their 2 kids, one of whom's in 3rd grade, one's in 1st, make dinner once a week. And they said, well, sometimes it's like a tortilla with yogurt. And in my mind, I'm like, I can't eat that. But the essential message is like, I'm making room for you to find your way and to make mistakes. And I have to be comfortable with the chaos that brings. So that's something I kind of have to work on.
The letting go of the need for control, maybe, or the outcome. Like what's really important, when thinking about things as we continue to evolve and progress, things to let go of. And one is that desire for controlling things all the time. That's a big one.
I've loved this.
Thank you for this delightful conversation, Megan. I just have to say, I didn't expect to feel as gratified as I do because we talk pretty often and you and I are in each other's lives, but really having this space to think through where we've come from, what we've done, who we are and who we hope to be, I feel awash with gratitude.
I completely agree. And you've been one of my most important friends for really my full adult life and have been present for so many critical points. And I also, we touched on this earlier, but the way in which a very close old friend becomes sort of a reservoir for the other person's life is great. Like there is stuff in my brain about your life. And I feel like truly this has been so nice because it's just, you're right. This is the kind of thing that's hard to give space for and give time to. So I am really grateful. I love you.
As always, thank you for your presence here with us today. Stay tuned for a brand new season of conversations coming this fall. Be sure to hit subscribe and to sign up for our newsletter and podcast release news at interwoven.com. That's interwovxn.com. This show's copyright is July of 2022. We want to thank our sponsors and affiliates as well as our producers, Teresa Kopak, Rebecca Jankowski, and Jen Gilmore of Sound Fort Studios. All original music for Season 1 was created and performed by Gina Barrington.